Hello, Karen. Welcome to the Sabbath at Midnight. Thank you for coming on.
Hi, Lionel and Dominic. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm just so happy to be here with y'all tonight.
Thank you. It's great having you.
Yes, thank you very much.
So you're in a genre where the topic's heating up again, and this book is very timely. And what I want to start off with, we'll just get right into this. What is your book? Stolen Seed, Evil Harvest about, just in a nutshell? And we'll get into more talking points.
Great. Yeah. The book is a chronicle of a lot of the things that have happened over my lifetime. I have been a victim of abduction from non-human alien entities from as young as I can remember, from my earliest memories. And the book chronicles my journey through that, and not just the negative things, but also some really amazing positive things that God's brought into my life through this journey. And I also talk about how I was able to stop it through the grace of God, and with God's help, I was able to stop these abductions from happening, and how I can help other people to know how to stop them as well.
Right. There's so much of that going on now.
Oh yes.
With that being said, so you were inspired to write this, obviously, right? From your interactions.
Yes. The inspiration came from a lot of places. I wanted it to be okay for people to start talking about this. There isn't a lot out there, and especially from a Christian perspective. Mm-hmm. And I wanted it to be able to start a conversation and to say it's okay to talk about this. When I first did start talking about it, the first person I talked with was L.A. Marzulli. Mm-hmm. And we did an interview that ended up being a part of his fourth movie in the UFO series, the Abduction phenomenon. And after that, I was approached by so many people, especially women who had been through a similar circumstance, who were just so appreciative that I was willing to come forward and share the information. And at that point, I realized that there was so much more that I could share, and LA encouraged me to write the book, and I felt very much led to write the book at that point as well. And that's kind of where it started.
Oh, okay. Right. L.A. Marzulli, he's on top of this alien phenomenon.
Absolutely. And he's supportive, and he understands, and he listens and believes. And that's a really hard thing for those of us who've gone through it, because it's very real. I assure you, there are a lot of people who like to say that this is just some kind of that it's not real, that we have some sort of delusion, or we don't know what we're talking about, or that's a dream. But when this type of thing happens your whole life, it is most definitely not a dream or a delusion. These are very real tactile things that are happening to people, that have happened to me, with very real scars and physical injuries, let alone psychological injuries that come with it and that are left behind, that show that these things really are happening.
That's when you say physical scars, I mean that says a lot. What happened to you? With that being said, by you sharing your life experiences, you want people to open up more about, because I'm sure there's more people out there who've gone through this, right? And
absolutely,
I think it's important.
Absolutely.
I think it's important for people who are listening to this show now, if something's happened to them, I think it's better for them to talk about it and not hold it inside, because that'll just destroy you and eat away at you.
It will. I've spent most of my life feeling like I was living two lives. And from the time I was really small, I had to figure out how to really put this in a place where I was able to live outside of what was happening to me so often. Mm-hmm. I have a memory of being about 6 years old, and they found me huddled in the corner of a bathroom stall at school. Mm-hmm. I think it was kindergarten or first grade. I can't remember which. And I just had a breakdown. I couldn't take it anymore. And I didn't have the vocabulary to explain to the adults everything that was happening. They didn't understand. And you have to remember back then, it was in the, early 70s. We didn't have these movies and books and TV shows and podcasts and all these things now that have kind of given a vocabulary to what's going on. And as a little kid, I was just being taken and terrified and terrorized, and I didn't know what to do with it. It just kind of, psychologically, I couldn't handle it. And then from that point on, I just learned how to separate it, because it's terrifying to a small child.
Absolutely.
How many times do you think you've had these interactions before you had that breakdown? Because it sounds like it's like it was happening a lot for you to be at that point, to just want to, snap like that.
Yeah, exactly. I have no idea. There's just no way to count, but it was quite often.
Wow.
And from a very young age. I mean, just as early as I can remember, they were just always showing up, always taking me.
Do you have
I was just...
Sorry, do you have I was going to ask you, do you have like the earliest memory that you could think of the first thing you remember?
One of my earliest memories was I was definitely pre-K, so I was probably 3 or 4 years old. And my father's family is very fair-haired, very tall, thin, blonde. And they reminded me so much of the Nordic aliens that I was encountering, that I was terrified of them, and they couldn't understand why I wanted nothing to do with them. But, I was just a little kid, and the difference is, obviously, they weren't aliens. They didn't look just like these Nordic type aliens, have much larger eyes. They were different. But to me, as a little kid, it was close enough. And they just terrified me. Wow. So pretty young.
That's very direct. And, for you to say the Nordics and have that look, like you said, the people back then would tell you you're crazy, you don't know what you're talking about, or you're dreaming, but everybody can't be having the same dream. You know what I mean? Yeah. Or seeing the same kind of alien, this blonde haired, looking, whatever they are, hybrid, so what, were they tall? So I get a lot of different descriptions. They're usually tall, blonde hair, light skin or glowing skin. And they're either really tall and skinny or really tall and muscular. Some kind of.
Yeah, they were, I don't remember paying too much attention to how muscular they were, but they were muscular and they looked fit, very fit, tall. Their hair is funny because it's almost like it was translucent, because sometimes it looked more brown and sometimes more blonde, but I think it depended on what was in the background, honestly. Like it kind of picked up the colors that were behind it or around it. And it's hard to describe. It wasn't like our hair. And their eyes, some of them were more blue-green, some were more icy, almost white blue. It just, they didn't all have the same color eyes, but they had very fair skin, not white, like paper white, but just very fair. And their eyes, the thing that creeped me out the most, their eyes were probably about 50% larger than ours and further spaced. So they just looked scary, creepy, I mean, it's hard for me to even think about their faces now, even to this day. It just, it gives me the shivers. It's just, and they weren't, for a little kid or an adult, you think when you have a dreams, you remember dreams kind of, but it's not the same as a memory. And memories stick with you. Memories are real. They're tangible because you're doing something and you're physically doing something. So you have smells and sights and the way something feels, if it's hot or cold. There are different things that go along with a memory that you don't get in a dream. And so when people say, well, are you sure you weren't dreaming? I'm like, well, how would I be dreaming the same thing over and over again, except, the place might be different or the entities might be different and the smells and the sounds and things like that. It's too specific. And I was there. I mean, I remember it the same as I remember going to school when I was little.
Wow. That's very impactful, especially for a small child to, at that age, you're imprinted with these things. That's, sorry to hear about that. It's just crazy.
It was crazy, and it was scary for a little kid.
Absolutely.
And that's what, makes the point that these are not benevolent space brothers coming
Yeah.
to help us or save the world. They are kidnapping and terrorizing adults and children and animals. I mean, we touched on the cattle mutilation thing earlier, and it's a similar thing. Those poor animals are suffering in the process.
Yeah, we'll get into later.
Okay.
The sons of God and this whole brother thing, it's something I want to break down that, because a lot of it's ridiculous. And in your book, you state that these non-human alien entities, they're intervening with the humans in attempt to corrupt the bloodline, the genome, and you believe that this is the dark agenda of Satan and his cohorts. What do you specifically mean by that?
Yeah. For those who know the Bible, you go back to Genesis 3, where the seed war began, where in the garden, where, with the Nakash and everything, and where God says, he will bruise your, heel and you will crush his head, when he's talking about Jesus and he's talking about Satan. And at that point, the seed war begins, right? And they're trying to stop Jesus from being born. And you would get to Noah and the Nephilim, and I don't want to repeat a bunch of things that your listeners and you already know.
Right.
But that seed war then continues afterwards and continues on today. And one of the reasons is, as the late Dr. Chuck Missler used to like to say, Satan, when he fell and a third of the angels fell with him, he's outnumbered 2-1. He needs more in his army. He needs more in his arsenal. And one way to do that is to keep creating modern day Nephilim. And another one of the reasons to do that is to have more ability to lead astray the people, the humans of this world, and to lead people away from the truth, lead people away from the gospel.
Wow.
Yeah, I do agree.
So when you say I believe you said Satan needs more Nephilim. So when you say that, like, what is your opinion or what you know about like these new Nephilim that they're making? Do you think are they doing it like in labs, or what's your opinion on it? That like today maybe these Nephilim look just like us, or
Right. Yeah, I think it's been a process. I do think after the flood of Noah, I think things changed, and they've been
more
trying
like a top
to
secret kind of form, right? Like,
right.
Yeah, not so like.
And I think that.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, like, I think it's more like a top secret kind of form, because you can't just have like a Nephilim walking around in New York City, 20 feet tall with horns on its head, because then it'd just be a Sora, So like I'm saying, like, I would think it'd be more like a process of making them look more and more like us, but with different abilities, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, exactly. And think about the weird sightings over the years. You had, we've gone from that to there are what they call the black-eyed children. You don't hear about them anymore, but there was a period of time where you heard about them, and different kinds of entities that kind of showed up. There was a period of time where you heard people talking about these really skinny, scraggly-haired kids that they'd see, and then there were the black-eyed children or people, and then and I think that the children that they took from my womb fell into that category from the ones that I saw. And I think it was an evolution of them trying to make them fit in more and more. How much DNA of human versus non-human, the alien entities, do you need to make it just human enough to pass for one of us? And Dr. David Jacobs, in his book, Walking Among Us, which I cannot read, I've tried, but it's way too triggering. But he does talk to a lot of people who have had interactions with these entities, and he's terrified that they're much more prevalent than we think that they are.
Wow, that's really creepy. It's like, it's like they're pretty much fitting in with this is not, I'm not even joking when I say this. I really think Mark Zuckerberg is like an example of because he's like, he doesn't have any like normal human behaviors.
I mean, how would we know?
Yeah, but he acts like it's his first time being a human sometimes. Like, doesn't know how to drink out of a bottle of water. It's weird, man.
Exactly. And I think those are some of the traits to look for. Someone who's, their eyes just aren't spaced quite right, or don't seem like quite the right size. They're not acting quite right. And I'm not saying to go out and judge everyone you see and be like, oh, that person must be an Nephilim. No, but they're trying to get it right, but they're not coming into it with the skill sets that we have. We're born into this societies and we're learning as we go along, and they don't have those advantages. So, there are some disadvantages, and those are some of the challenges that they face trying to integrate into our society. So, it's not without its challenges for them. But the more they can convince people that they are our space brothers, the easier it's going to be to integrate than any kind of a, half or partially human entity into society.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
And doesn't it fit well with we're not allowed to give anyone, we're not allowed to point out anyone's differences or
Mm-hmm.
make a big deal. We have to accept everyone where they are. And I get that. And I love that, because as Christians, we should be loving and accepting of everyone. But it also kind of makes it easier to bring in, if no one wants to have an identity of a specific type or gender or whatever, then that makes it a lot easier to bring in these entities who don't seem to fit in, but in that way, now they're going to fit in just fine, because
Mm-hmm.
society is allowing everything to be okay at this point.
Mm-hmm. I do. Yeah, that's a good point.
And that's not belittling or anything like that of anyone. I respect everyone's right to identify and be whomever they want. But for me, I think it just makes it easier, especially for Satan to be able to pull off whatever he's trying to do, especially with some kind of a Nephilim or some kind of a hybrid being.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. In your book, you have two definitions, and somehow these tie into the abduction phenomenon. It's, if I pronounce this right, ectogenesis and panspermia. Can you expound on that for the listeners?
Sure. Ectogenesis is something that has been in the news a lot lately, and it's funny because I've seen this. Oh my gosh, I've seen this in the facilities they've taken me to my whole lives, but it's the ability to bring a fetus of any kind, human, animal, what have you, to term outside a natural womb. So it's basically an artificial womb environment that can nurture and grow a fetus until it's viable outside of that environment. And we have that today. It's all over the news, the artificial wombs that they've created. And that's something that I saw when I was being taken, especially when I was of childbearing years. Just walls of what looked like aquariums, and they were filled with some sort of liquid, and in them would be some sort of a fetus, and it was hard to tell what they were, because even a human fetus is hard to identify. We know that it's human, but they don't look, they look different. They look strange when they're in your utero, and it's not something you see every day, and especially when I was younger, because now we have so much available to us online, but 30, 40 years ago, it was really weird to see all those things that they had in these facilities. And I say facilities because sometimes I was underground, sometimes I would be on some sort of a ship, but you don't always know where you wake up when they take you. So
how big are these facilities? Because I'm trying to get a picture. Like when you said you saw this wall full of tanks, I'm like thinking like, one of those Matrix movies where you see these big stacks of like I'm not even like, I really believe everything you're saying, but it's very interesting. Like you're talking about some stuff that's just, it's not a coincidence.
That's a good question. Yeah. Some of the facilities I was in, especially some of the underground ones, it was interesting because I could tell there were older areas that were just kind of carved in stone, and you could still see stone and things like that. They looked like tunnels. And then there would be what definitely looked like newer areas to me, where the rooms were just massive and the hallways were very neat and orderly, and like a big high school would be almost, or a big hospital or a big airport where. So, as far as what you asked about where these rows of tanks with the fetuses were, it was like a typical hallway, maybe in a hospital or a high school or something like that, but it was about probably 15 to 20 feet high, I think. I'm a very bad judge of distance sometimes. So,
Yeah.
but it was very tall, much taller than what I could see. You know, I couldn't see what was in the tanks towards the top. And the hallway was about as wide as like a high school hallway would be, or a hospital hallway, like a typical, hallway. Like it had been really well engineered.
Was someone walking you through this hallway, or were you by yourself when you saw this?
Oh, there was always someone with me. Yes. Generally, I had a person with me that I referred to as my handler, and I describe him in detail in the book. From as young as I can remember, there was this one entity with me. And what's funny is that the more people I've talked to, this is a very common thing among us, that we all had someone specific that was with us, and I call him a handler. He appeared human. He was tall, very muscular, well built, had a very kind of military, high and tight haircut, very square jaw, just looked like, you could have cut him out of a magazine, kind of normal looking, almost military looking guy. He was with me for as early as I can remember. I don't really have a lot of memories where he wasn't around, and he was there to just escort me around, to be someone who I was comfortable with, to act as, what a handler, what you think of when you think of a handler in any kind of like a trafficking situation almost. So, as a young child, I feel like I was groomed to learn their ways, learn what to do, learn how to react and act, and to parrot their message, which was, we're just here to help. You're part of something special. You're someone special. You're important to us. And everyone that I've talked to, it's so funny, was given that similar message. He wasn't human. And it sounds out there, but I really believe he was a fallen angelic entity. He wasn't a demon, because a demon is a spirit looking for a body to inhabit, and he wasn't a demonically inhabited body. He could change his form, and he did in front of me.
Oh, wow. Into what? What did he change into?
Yeah. When I was older and had a more personal relationship with him, I felt very comfortable and close to him. And, he showed me his true form, and he was what you would think of as a reptilian type.
Oh my God.
Entity. Yeah. I've looked for pictures to find something that looked like him, and I haven't found anything really as close to what he was, but his head was large. His ears, you didn't really see his ears. They were flat against the side of his head. Nose was very flat. His mouth was thinner, but for the most part, it's just typically what you would think and of a reptilian type being. And he would change his form, and show me his true form later on. And I guess the ability to look human was so that I would be more comfortable.
Well, yeah.
And, and not freak out, because if you just ran into this being the way he looked in his natural form and I hadn't known him, it would have definitely, been a scary situation. I mean, it was scary all around anyway, right? But I found him beautiful in that form. He was stunning. He was beautiful. And I tried to describe in detail in the book, because he was just, and I was uncomfortable with how beautiful he was, especially, within my Christian walk. And you got to remember, I was falling away for a long time, especially during my abductions. When I found my way back and God brought me back to him, I was able to stop these abductions. But when I was falling away, I found him so attractive, and he was, and the Bible says Satan was very beautiful, the most beautiful of all the beings, so it makes sense that they wouldn't necessarily be these ugly, wretched, crawling on the ground, gross things. When you think of Satan or a fallen angelic being, don't think of something ugly, because, that's not going to work. Then that's also not going to help them if they appear as ugly either. Right.
Right. What did did you get a glimpse of his eyes and the skin color and?
His skin color, it's funny because, it used to appear very glistening and just almost opalescent, like an opal.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a green opal color. It was beautiful and almost like flat scales on his skin. But they were like jewels. That's the best way I can describe it.
Yeah. Don't they call them the shimmering ones?
Shining ones?
The shining ones.
Yeah, he was very beautiful. Yeah. And the last time that I saw him, which was not too long ago.
Oh, wow.
God. Jeez, that's scary.
He came to offer to try to have me come back and to offer me, we can help you. We can give you everything you want. It's one of those, offers of one of those typical, you can have whatever you want and just serve me kind of deals. He didn't look shiny anymore. His appearance was more of a matte green and almost looked like he was getting sick.
Maybe.
And I thought that's really interesting because he never seemed to age and never looked older. This man who was with me my whole life didn't age.
Probably needed you. He probably needed your energy or something like that to stay young.
Something is different. Yeah. And it was still him. I mean, that face is embedded in my mind. And I can just see it in front of mine if I close my eyes, and I don't like it. But he didn't look the same. He looked sickly and older, and I'm like, is something happening to these guys? I don't know that it's me, and I'm wondering, are we getting into the last days? Do they know their time is short? Is this what their time is short means? Because if he never seemed to age throughout my whole life, and now he's starting to look different, granted, he probably still has quite a bit of time, right? But it's interesting that his look changed. I really found that odd. And I just wonder if it has something to do with what's going on in the world today.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Possibly, yeah. You mentioned in your book regarding the modern abduction agenda, you list Roswell and the Granada Treaty. How do those, Roswell, people know Roswell, but how does Granada tie into these events, in your opinion?
Right. I put both of those in there because most people are familiar with one of those with Roswell.
Right.
And I put Roswell and the Granada Treaty in there because it's a really good example of, and I'll explain I won't explain Roswell because I think everyone's pretty much familiar with that, but it's a good example of how our government's been involved from the beginning, and they keep changing their answers and hiding and obfuscating information and refusing to tell the truth and share the information. With Roswell, the first headline was, that the saucer had crashed. And then then they pull that back and say, oh, wait, no, it's a weather balloon. I'm sorry, you don't mistake those two things. And there were too many witnesses. That one got out of hand pretty easily. And the Granada Treaty is about the time when the Majestic 12 and those groups came together, where they were supposedly, and Eisenhower was involved, but wasn't the one who supposedly signed the treaty. But this is a point where our government, or an offshoot of our government, probably a dark, offshoot that's not part of the mainstream government, made an agreement with these entities and exchanged technology for allowing them to abduct and experiment on people and animals and whatever they wanted. And I think that's where the permission comes in. We all know from our friend Vicki Joy Anderson that there does have to be a permission somewhere along the line.
Right.
And I think that's where a lot of the permission started. Someone has to give permission.
Yeah.
And I think that and then that's another obfuscation. They're like, oh, there's nothing to that. That's just conspiracy theory. But then more and more of this information is coming out. More and more of these documents are released.
Mm-hmm.
Some are heavily redacted, but there's still enough information to verify, yeah, the Majestic 12 existed. Yeah, there was something that was going on there with that Granada Treaty. Do we have details? No, I'm not sharing that. But it's enough to know that there was something to it. And then today we have all these congressional hearings
Mm-hmm.
and whistleblowers coming forward and people trying to share information. But anything important is done behind closed doors or not given to the people that are, asking for it.
Right.
So it just goes to show this progression of our government's known all along. They haven't shared information. I doubt that they ever will. I don't think we'll ever have any kind of real sharing of information, because when I was abducted, there were humans there too.
Wow.
There weren't just these alien entities, and not just the ones that were shape-shifting like my handler was, but there were actual humans there. And I know this because these humans were threatened not to say anything. And I don't think they knew what they were getting into when they probably signed up for these programs. And once you're in it, you're in it, and if you love your family and your friends, you're not going to say anything. So I think there's a lot of this, people take this to their grave because they're afraid to hurt the people they love. And I don't blame them. I was threatened by these entities from the time I was very, very young, not to say a word to anyone. And that if I did, that they would hurt my family. And they showed me what looked like virtual reality movies. Back then, we didn't have anything like that, so there's no way for me to describe it. But now I can describe it like that, where I was watching my family be killed in front of me. And they're like, this is what's going to happen if you keep trying to talk to people, because I was trying to tell people when I was little. Mm-hmm. And they were not having that.
Wow. They had the technology. Yeah.
Oh, their technology was so far advanced. I mean, I would go into these rooms. They would take me into a room, and the whole room was like a TV screen, and show me scenes of, just the waves coming up and the earth flooding, and saying, look, this is going to happen if you don't, let people know that, they're just trying to, their propaganda. But how do you describe that? Before we had that, that doesn't make sense to anyone. Now, yeah, sure, now we have it. But when I was seeing that, we didn't have anything like that for me to compare it to.
Was it like a hologram kind of thing in the middle of empty space? Or was it on like a big screen or the wall? Or...
Yeah, it was like a room, and the room didn't really have any seams, like corners or anything. The whole room was, from ceiling to the floor, was just like a screen. So I couldn't tell that there were any seems. There could have been holographic properties to it. I never went and tried to put my hand up through to see if, if it would go through like it would in a hologram. But I was usually a few other people in the room when I would be in there. And there's like in one of the rooms, I remember specifically, there was just a bench like in the middle of the room, and we sit on this bench, and then we would be shown whatever they wanted us to see that day. And quite often it was just nature scenes, like horrific things like fires or floods or things like that. And it didn't make sense to me. Why are you showing me this over and over again? It doesn't make sense. And they're like, well, this is what's going to happen to your world if you don't let us help you, and so it became conditioning and, again, this kind of grooming where this is the message we want you to share. And that's how they did it.
It sounds like I'm not even trying to be funny, but it sounds like they're trying to push that climate change propaganda at such a young age. So it sounds like to
right?
me, yeah,
yeah.
With those images,
the climate change thing makes me laugh because I'm like, oh my gosh, I've even had this pushed on me my whole life.
You already had this happen 30 years. Yeah, that's a bunch of That's insane.
It didn't affect me then. It's not going to affect me now.
That's the first thing that I thought about when you said all they show you is natural disasters, and well, that's kind of weird. And he's saying that if you don't basically bend the knee to these things, the world's going to just get bad weather. I mean, that sounds like the climate change propaganda just repackaged. And I mean, you're getting more of a direct, what do you call it? Direct contact with it. But Now it's spread like wildfire. You got people using themselves as human punching bags just to get this point across of climate change. We're going to die for this junk, but it's crazy.
And it's cyclical. I mean, we know our Earth has, and our climate is cyclical. We know this from historical evidence. We know this from, seashells that are found on top of mountains and things like that. We know that this is a cyclical thing. God created it that way. Everything has a reason. And then they're acting like this is all something new. I'm like, we've had cold winters and hot summers before. So
absolutely.
I'm not worried.
No. According to them, New York should be underwater by now, right? I mean, Florida.
Oh, yeah. Should have been underwater
20 years ago.
10 years ago, right?
It's just a bunch of nonsense. It really is. Yeah, you mentioned in your book a near-life experience.
Oh, yeah.
What happened?
That was really wonderful. And I think it's really one of the reasons why I was able to share my experiences with L.A. Marzulli and then able to write the book, because I had an experience before a surgery a couple of years ago. I guess it was about 7 years ago. It wasn't too long. Excuse me.
Sure.
And I was waiting in the operating room for surgery to begin, but I wasn't hooked up to anything yet. I just had a couple of IV ports, but I wasn't on machines or anything yet. Nurses were just kind of doing their thing in and out of the room. The doctor was in the other room getting ready. And the anesthesiologist came in. This is the only time I saw this woman too, which was weird. And she had a pocket. The breast pocket of her white lab coat was full. I remember this so clear, full of syringes. She took one out and pushed it into my IV port and said it was my sedative, and turned around and left the room. She didn't ask me, how's that? How do you feel? Nothing. And she turned around and left the room, and I was alone. And all of a sudden, my body started to feel like cement. She gave me a paralytic.
Oh, wow.
And I died on the table, and there's no one around. I couldn't signal anyone. I couldn't talk to anyone. I mean, it took effect so quickly. It was like drowning, but not being in the water. It was the most terrifying. I couldn't do anything. I was trapped, and I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I've had a couple of people recently say, do you think that was on purpose? I don't know. I don't know if they're still trying to stop me from talking, but it's too late. I'm not going to stop talking. So I died on the table, and I couldn't even think. I mean, I just was like, what am I supposed to do? God, what do I do? And God said, it's okay. Just, you can let go now. And in the blink of an eye, I was out of my body, and I could see and hear and experience everything. I was still me, but I was outside of my physical body. I could see all the other rooms in the hospital. It's like the fact that there were walls didn't stop me from seeing through them. It's pretty cool. I mean, I think it's going to be really cool when we all get out of here and get our new, heavenly bodies and stuff, because if that is any indication, it's going to be awesome. It was the most peace and love that I have ever felt in my life. We have nothing like it. There's no way for me to even describe the love and the peace that I felt. I wish there was a way to describe it, but it's just, we don't even come close. And I've held my babies in my arms, and, I love my husband, and I've experienced love and peace, but nothing like this. Wow. It was really incredible. Wow. Then one of the nurses noticed that I wasn't breathing, and, they eventually intubated me and got me breathing again and went forward with the surgery. And at that point, everything went black. So the next thing I know, I was in recovery, which is where it gets really interesting if you want me to tell the rest of that
absolutely.
Story. Yeah. So I'm in recovery, and they can't get me out of, recovery, because every time they bring me out of anesthesia, I'm just screaming in pain and just, I don't think I wanted to come back into my body, quite honestly. and so this went on for about 3.5 hours. And finally, I remember them bringing me out of it. And, when your heart rate and your blood pressure goes up so much and you're at risk to stroking out, they've got to keep putting you under and trying to bring you out. And so the last, that last time, about 3.5 hours in, I remember praying, going, God, help me. I don't know what to do. And I looked down at the foot of the gurney that I was on, and there were these two young orderlies, two young men at the foot of the bed. And they calmed me down, and they helped me through. And all of a sudden, I was okay. The pain was there, but I was okay with it. Everything was just good. And so they just helped me through it. I got out of recovery. They wheeled me up to my room in ICU, and my husband and my daughter were there. And I grabbed their hands and I'm like, you have to meet the two boys, these two orderlies. They're so wonderful. I don't know how I would have got through this without them. They helped me through, and they're like, what two boys? I'm like, oh, they're right here. They came up with me in the elevator. And I looked at the nurse. I'm like, where'd the boys go? And she's like, honey, what boys are you talking about? And I said, the two orderlies that were with us. They were in recovery with me. And nobody knew who I was talking about.
Wow, that's cool.
I was the only one who saw them.
Wow.
And so I'm like, when you pray and God sends you an angel, he sends angels, that's what a good angelic being is. They didn't ask for anything. They didn't hurt me. They came and carried out God's orders, and they helped me. And they did it with love and kindness. That's what a good angelic being is. And I had that amazing experience with them. But I did suffer a stroke from that. I did suffer a lot of PTSD after that. So I went to therapy to deal with the PTSD from just from being trapped in my own body like that, and just being terrified. And I had more surgeries to go, so I had to figure this out. And it was that PTSD therapy that helped me actually start dealing with my lifetime of abduction issues. You can't tell your therapist that, because I was pretty sure she would just lock me up.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but those tools were the tools that I used to be able to finally deal with this and start talking about it. And so that's kind of how I was able to meet with LA and share my story with him. I couldn't believe I shared my story with him. I had never shared it with anyone, just my husband. And that was scary, but I had to at some point, let him know why I was the way I was and the things that terrified me, like not being able to look out the window at night, or, just crazy things from my past that were just really hard to deal with. Not being able to look at a movie that had a UFO on it or in it, or any kind of a TV show or any kind of a book cover. I couldn't look at any of that stuff. I couldn't listen to it. I couldn't watch it. I had no basis for any of my story or anything I wrote, because I had never watched or listened to or read any of those things before. I couldn't do it. So then I shared my story with LA, and he reassured me that my story was one just like many other people's. And that's when I really started looking into it and realized this is something I need to talk about.
Absolutely.
So
the two young boys, you say young, maybe 20s or?
Yeah, I say that because I have kids that age. So, my youngest are in that age range. So, and I remember telling them, oh, you look like you could be some of my kids, because everybody calls me mom. And there's, a lot of kids that think of me as mom. So I just, called them, the boys, because they felt like they could have been my kids. They were just, and not saying they looked like mine or were mine. I'm just saying they were just in that age range, and they were just polite and kind and loving and sweet. And it was just like, wow, they're just so amazing. Everyone needs to meet these two. You should have you should get a raise. I'm like, what are your names so I can, tell everyone about you. And then I realized they didn't have badges or anything. They were just in scrubs.
Scrubs, right? What do they look like? Their facial features.
Very normal. Like on the street, they looked like they could have been brothers. They had light brown hair, very just normal looking features. They weren't heavy or overly thin. They were just, they looked like kind of your average 20-something-year-old. They were in good shape. They were just very normal features, nothing that stood out. You know what I mean? Exactly. In a crowd, you know, they were kind of the Where's Waldo. They would have just fit right in anywhere.
Yeah, the reason why I asked that, because I wanted to differentiate between that and the Nordics.
Oh, yeah, they didn't look anything like the Nordics. No, they just looked like one of us. And, you know, and so, and to that end, I think that's when you really know God's hand is in it, because, you know, the Bible tells us you could be entertaining angels unaware. And certainly that was the case there. I had no idea until after. I'm like, oh my goodness. You know, then I realized I didn't have a physical conversation with them, but they were talking to me. Wow. You know, so, you know, they were calming me down and just comforting me, but they weren't talking to me. And so then I realized, oh, wow. Yeah. But, you know, I was coming out of anesthesia, so I wasn't thinking clearly. I was just grateful that someone was there who was really being kind and helpful to me. Not that the other doctors and nurses weren't, but they were just so worried about me not having a stroke or a heart attack that I don't think anyone was paying attention to the fact that I just needed to calm down.
Absolutely. That's a lot of stuff you went through.
Yeah. There have been a few things that, you know, but God's really given me beauty for ashes. He's managed to take the stuff that's happened and use it for good. And, you know, that's really the blessing in all this. I don't know how I'm here today. I don't know how I am okay with everything. That's all God. You know, I couldn't deal with any of this on my own. It's hard to even think about, but I am here and I'm okay. And God just keeps getting me through to the next day and the next thing. And I'm just trying to be a faithful servant. And I just want to do good. And I want to, you know, I want to do good work for God and to be pleasing in His sight. And so that's my goal every day. And I don't want to dwell on the bad stuff.
Exactly.
I want to find the good in these things. And God says He'll give you beauty for ashes. And boy, He really does. When you least expect it, it's really amazing.
What do you say to these people that follow this story that the aliens are malevolent? They're space brothers, the elder race. They're here to enlighten us. They're us from the future, and they went off planet and developed technology and all this other nonsense.
How about they're hiding on Mars or they're hiding behind the moon on the dark side of the moon? What about all that stuff? Or they have a big ship around the sun.
Like, oh, yeah.
Now they're hiding by the sun, the big motherships, and they're ready to come down any day now. Oh my Lord, they're surfing Saturn's rings and all this good stuff. Go ahead.
You know, there's a lot of stuff out there. I'm like, who says? Where'd that come from? Where do you get your information?
No idea where to get it from. It's not in the Bible.
Yeah, most of it's just come from hearsay and people making. And I'm not disparaging anyone, you know. And I really don't want to disparage anyone. I do believe, I do listen to and try to, you know, anyone who has a story to tell in this realm. What I can tell you is they're very deceptive. So I think that anyone who says these things really truly believes it. And I'm not here to judge anyone for their beliefs or what they're doing, but what I will say is these beings are deceptive. Their MO is deception. I mean, we know that's since the garden. We know before then, you know, and they are here to deceive and to lie, kill, cheat, deceive, you know, that's Satan's MO. So they're not our benevolent space brothers. And for anyone who says that they are, I'd like to know, since when is kidnapping and torturing a small child okay? When is that benevolent? When has that been good? When is raping young men and women been a good thing? When is mutilating defenseless animals okay? I mean, I could go on and on, but none of these things that they do are benevolent. Just because they do a nice thing here or there doesn't make them benevolent. And if they're so concerned about our Earth and so concerned about our planet and so concerned about our people and everything else, and if they're so far advanced of us, then they can come, and if they are our space brothers from the future and they're that advanced, then they can figure out how to actually just have a conversation with someone and figure out how to share enough information that would help us. But that's not what I see happening. What I see happening is kidnaps, rapes, mutilations, all kinds of terrible things. That's not okay.
Absolutely. I agree. Wholeheartedly agree with that.
Right. And so that's kind of my soapbox. I'm sorry I got on there.
No,
but
that's okay.
Yeah, I hear that a lot, and people want to debate that all day long. And I'm like, that's fine. I'm not going to disparage your beliefs, but what happened to me wasn't okay. It was terrifying. It was horrible. It was breaking the law for the least of it, you know?
Yeah. What's curious is you saw humans on these craft or whatever, wherever you were at. Were they wearing specific type of color jumpsuits, or how were they dressed? Because I hear in other stories like some of them were dressed like in orange with like an insignia.
Yeah, I don't ever remember seeing an orange suit. Most of the clothing was of very neutral colors.
Okay.
So like neutral beiges and like kind of cream and beige colors.
Military.
Earth tones, that kind of thing. There were military looking fatigues on some people as well. Some people were wearing lab coats, like doctors would wear. Some were wearing just like these really smocky type outfits that were very loose fitting, so they looked really androgynous. You couldn't tell, are you a man or a woman kind of thing. So yeah, it would just be different, I think, depending on what their job was. I'm not sure why different people had different types of outfits on. And I could have been that some of them, were not human, but looked human enough that I couldn't tell.
Kind of reminds me of the Men in Black movie with all those different kind of beings getting off the airport or at the facility. Yeah. Like, they get these ideas from somewhere. These movies are, no one's that creative. You just don't make up these stories out of nowhere. So
right?
Yeah, I really do
exactly.
like Total Recall. I think that right there, that movie has way too much spot on weird looking creatures and technology in it. The way they make that movie, as if you just can't be that creative. No one's that creative.
No, I do think they get a lot from there, and the recall thing is interesting because a lot of people don't remember these things happening in these abductions or these interactions with these entities because they are so far advanced from us that they have the ability to manipulate our memories and our ability to remember. But from the time I was little, I was remembering, and they knew I was, and that's why they had to threaten me with my family when I was really little so I would stop talking. And I don't remember every time, but there were enough times where they weren't able to keep me from remembering. The screen memories or whatever they were trying to do didn't work, or putting me, making me sleep didn't work. Or sometimes I would just lay there and just be really compliant and quiet. And so they wouldn't do anymore.
Right.
Because I didn't like it. I've never liked not feeling like I'm 100% in control because of all of that. So it's, I would just rather be compliant and not have them mess with me. And so there are a lot of different reasons why I remember some of these things, and not everyone does. But I'll tell you, there are a lot of people who do remember. And it is so traumatic that God has blessed us with an ability to not have to continue to relive these traumatic events in our lives. And then they just we block them out. And we know that's a very common thing that happens with people. And based on what I've experienced and seen with these entities, I can understand why a lot of people would just completely block out what they've experienced.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's traumatic.
It is just seeing and thinking about it. I mean, like I said, I couldn't look out a window at night. As an adult.
I know. We have a guy that we interviewed, and we interviewed him, and he was taken, and to this day he doesn't go out at night.
No, I'm not alone. I mean, only recently, and I'm still not comfortable when I step foot outside by myself.
Wow.
I mean, And now I look out the windows at night because I'm not scared anymore of that, because I know that I can rebuke them. I've had them right up to my window and I'm like, nope. And now I know, and I know that Jesus is the authority.
Right.
I know he's the top of the pyramid. He's the top of the heap. No, there's no authority greater than his. And if I call on that authority, it's there. Mm-hmm. So I know now that I don't have to be afraid. But, they'll look for any chink in your armor. And if you don't have the full armor of God on, you can be in real trouble with these things.
I believe so. You mentioned the handler. Did this thing have a name?
No, I never called him by a name. It's so weird because he had it. It's so hard to describe. It was a sense. It's kind of like how a baby, if a couple of moms are there and the baby can't see, but it knows which one's its mom. And it wasn't, I can't say it's by smell because that wasn't it either. We have this connection and I can't explain it, but it's like there's two pieces that always magnetize together whenever he was there. I always knew it was him. He always knew it was me. Do you know what I mean? We had some kind of I wish I could explain it. It was more of a mind, body, spirit kind of connection. There's just no way. I don't have a way to describe it. That's the one thing that's the hardest. And I couldn't even write about it because I couldn't figure out how to describe it. I guess I need to pray about that. Mm-hmm. But it's just a knowing. So I never had to call him by anything.
Yeah, it seems like maybe they don't need names where these things are. When you were explaining that, it shapeshifted. It reminded me of the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, the fallen entity, basically a demon, fallen angel. Mm-hmm. It says in there that when the glamour was lifted, they were serpent faced.
Oh, wow. I'm not familiar with that. Oh, that's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah. That there seems to be something to it. I'm hearing more and more about it. Like I said, now I'm kind of able to listen to and watch things that I've never been able to look at before. And it seems like there's more and more of this, reptilian information out there than I ever realized.
Oh, yes. There's a lot of, reports of reptilians. I have someone that reported seeing up in the mountains here a reptilian. I haven't interviewed him, but I plan on getting him on. And we had Lionel's friend, his family saw a reptilian on our ranch, and Lionel can better describe it. But that next day I found my dog dead, and all the fluid was drained out of it, and as a pet bull too. And so those things are real. And you mentioned, just moving forward, you mentioned your book, that it seems like these I don't know if they're extraterrestrial. I mean, are they of the earth or other reality here, another dimension of the earth? Are they from space? I doubt it. But
no,
I think they're from here. I think they're just another dimension. I don't think they're out in Pluto or whatever. And you mentioned in your book that they target children, and you connect that to pedophiles.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's two good things you said there. Who and where they come from. I definitely want to touch on that. But yeah, I think they target children for a couple of reasons. I think, like I said, they don't age like we do. And I don't know what their lifespans are. I have no idea, no way of knowing that. But clearly much longer than ours, especially if they are fallen angelic entities. I think they target children because you can groom a child to follow a doctrine from an early age. Just look at any, doctrine. Look at the Hitler Youth. Look at just any normal kind of educational program. You're teaching a child to follow a specific regimen. I was taught from a very young age, this is normal. This is going to happen. You don't talk about it. You figure out how to deal with it. This is the message that we want you to share, and and I was groomed to do what they wanted me to do. And from a young age, if you start a child out early, then you're going to have a more compliant victim, because we've learned, those of us who were taken at a young age learned how to do as we were told.
That's scary. So you think, what was I going to say? So with all this, all the young children, do you think, well, I have a theory. I think the fallen angels, I think they're in a physical form, a lot of them. Mm-hmm. And I think when they got kicked out of heaven, they lost their ability to be immortal in a physical form. So I think maybe they die and they become a spirit as well or something like that. But in my opinion, from the things that I've read, but you probably know more than me. Clearly that's why I'm telling you, clearly what I've heard and what you experienced are two different things. But, like they kind of use children also to, because they have, I don't know, something about the blood is more innocent. It's something to do with us, spiritually feeding the youth of these creatures, and the blood is more pure and it keeps them, younger and something like that.
I think the innocence too, that's like giving God the middle finger, when you're taking a child of his, and that someone's given permission for that child to be taken, that's like taking a kitten and, yanking it away from the mama cat and doing something bad to it.
Of course.
You know what I mean? That's evil.
Yes.
Okay. So I think that's one of the reasons too, where they take children. I do, we're dealing with a couple of different things when you're dealing with these entities as well. The typical grays, I think, that a lot of people see, they are different than all of the other entities I've ever encountered. The grays that usually show up in someone's room or outside someone's window, or, that people have these sightings of that are about 3 to 4 feet tall, they have just kind of a slit where a mouth would be. They have the large bulbous heads, the big black kind of screen looking eyes, almond shaped eyes. They, I believe are just kind of like an avatar meat suit. And I say that with some authority because I've been around them a lot. They don't smell good. Some of them smell worse than others.
I've heard that before,
they kind of smell like a cross between like a sulfur and a dead animal.
Well, there you go. Sulfur. Is that the smell of a demonic spirit?
Yeah, there's probably a reason behind that, because I and others, and Whitley Strieber, even in his book, which I haven't read, but I was told this part of his book, reports seeing the gray suits just stacked in corners or in drawers or hanging up on the ships. We've all seen them just empty somewhere on a ship or underground where we were at the time. I believe that these suits are used as their kind of worker bees. They're used because they can be in our atmosphere and around people without putting the alien entities at as much risk. I believe that they're inhabited by demonic entities. Or they can be AI inhabited. I think they could even be used or worn as a suit, because it is a suit. I believe the demonic entities to be the spirits of the dead Nephilim that were neither from heaven nor of earth, because they had an earthly parent and a fallen angelic parent. The Watchers, the original 200 Watchers that fell, and saw in Genesis 6, daughters of men were beautiful and had children with them, and God found that to be an abomination. And those Nephilim were killed in the flood, and then they were cursed to roam the earth because they didn't belong chained up with the fallen Watchers or in heaven, right? So I believe those are inhabiting the gray suits. They really just want a body to inhabit. Boom, there's your body. But they're subservient to the fallen angelic beings because they aren't at that level, right? And so I believe that's what inhabits the gray suits. Demonic entities are all different, because just like a person, all of those Nephilim would have a different personality. So not all of them are going to act and react the same. But that gray alien suit is very restrictive. I mean, if you look at just the basics of it, they don't have a mouth that opens. They don't eat. They don't breathe. There's no organs external that you can see or even room for an internal organ from the way that thing looks.
Yeah.
Their limbs are so thin
Brittle.
and they seem so frail, like a small child could just snap them in two. They are built for carrying out tasks. And then think if that's what's here and one of those gets captured, and like our government says, they have biologics. Well, if you get that biologic, that demon is out of there, and what are you left with?
Yeah.
Skin that was created in a lab. We can do that today, by the way, too.
Oh, yeah,
so it's not so
yeah.
crazy to think about some kind of a robotic or avatar suit that would be inhabited, right?
What do you think of those little aliens that they showed on the Mexico government channel about a month and a half ago? Those little things in the coffin.
Yeah, I can't give any sort of an educated opinion on it because there's no information about them. No. There's no chain of custody from where they were found to who they were with and where they've been since and where they've gone. There's no official, nothing was done with any officialness to it. So it could be made of, chalk, or there were some funny videos going around where they're made of cake or something like that. We just don't know. Yeah. There's no information and nothing was done with any level of, it doesn't have to be a part of a government and probably shouldn't be when you find something like that to be well documented. Video and pictures, and this is where we found it, and this is where it was, when it was found in situ, what it looked like. There's none of that. Yeah. So there's just nothing and that kind of seems to have gone away as quickly as it bubbled up to the surface, right?
Yeah, it just, it looks so, obviously I've never looked at them or examined them, but just just first looking at it, it looks like paper mache or something, like a pinata or something.
Yeah. It didn't look like anything I'd ever seen. No. And I've seen a lot of different entities, and that didn't strike me as anything. Mm-hmm. And, something I have in common with all the other abductees I've spoken with as well, and it's quite a few people that I've spoken to, we can see a picture or video of a UFO or UAP or whatever or something, and we just immediately can tell you that's fake. That's real. You get this immediate feeling. We just feel it. Just like when they show up. Right. I know when there's one outside my home.
That's wild.
I'll feel that and I'll just start praying. And sometimes I've got pictures of a few, but
oh, really?
I've kind of stopped. Yeah. I'll put some out on my Facebook just so that they're far away ones. They're not like up close or anything like that. Cause I'm not, I'm not comfortable. I don't, I'm not afraid because I know God's got me, but I'm not giving him any energy. I'm not giving him the time of day. It's not something you should go chasing after. I mean, I know everyone's really interested and wants to see him, but if you go
looking for them,
entertaining these things or calling on these things, you might as well be playing with a Ouija board or calling on the devil. Because that's all the same stuff. There's two sides. There's good and there's evil. There's no in between. You can be a Laodicean and you might get it okay, but there really is no gray area, pardon the pun, but it's good or it's bad, and these things are just evil. They're just evil. So I don't encourage anyone to ever go looking for them. But if you're out there, of course I look up, to see what's out there.
I do it all the time.
And if I've got an opportunity, I'm going to take a picture, sure, but I'm definitely not going to try to call on them. Let's put it that way.
Right.
I just don't like it when they're close by. No, and then you get this UFO brain fog. I don't know if y'all have ever heard of that, but whenever they're around, I get that I'm not thinking clearly. I do think to call on Jesus. That's the first thing. Rebuke first, like L.A. Marzulli says, ask questions later. But then I forget to pull out my phone or take a picture or whatever, I'm just like, oh my gosh, did you guys see that? I'm like, oh, why didn't I take a picture? Right. I've had sightings with friends at the beach in Florida. We saw a bunch of the little round orbs that all went into a big round orb and then sped away. Tons of people saw that when we were on the beach, but none of us took a picture.
Oh.
Crazy stuff like that. So, but they're always around wherever I go. They're always up there. People are like, do you see these every time because people will be outside with me at night and they're like, did you see that? I'm like, yeah, I saw it.
It's like, no big deal. Yeah, okay, it's there. I see.
No, I'm just trying not. Yeah, I just don't want to give them any energy. I'm like,
Exactly,
yeah,
yeah.
they're out there. I don't know why they still follow me around, but they do, and it's uncomfortable. It's an uncomfortable feeling knowing they're still up there.
Yeah, absolutely. How many? You said entities. How many different entities did you encounter?
Well, aside a couple, probably half a dozen that I can think of, because aside from those little grays that everyone's familiar with, there's another type of gray that I've had contact with they're usually there when you're getting examined. They look like those little grays, but they're taller. They're more sturdy built. They look older. But I don't know that they're older, but they have like more wrinkles to their skin. Their eyes move back and forth. They have facial expressions. Their mouths move. So there's a different kind of gray that those gray suits must be modeled after, because they look real similar to them. And they're definitely a species of their own. There's of course, the reptilian type, the Nordic type, and that other one that I find the most creepy of all of them is what people call a mantis type.
Oh, no, I was about to ask you that right now, the insectoids.
Yeah.
Man, you saw that?
Yeah, that is the most creepy thing I have ever seen in my life. They're never up close to where I am. They're always back in like the corner of a room. When I was little, I called them the corner sitters. And then I used to go take all the praying mantises out of our yard and throw them over the fence. I wasn't afraid to pick them up, which says a lot about a little kid and a big praying mantis. But they would always be in the corner. They had that kind of face like a praying mantis, long arms, long legs, skinny bodies. Just nothing about them looked right. But, we think everything should look like us, right? So, I mean, our basis for comparison isn't much. But yeah, they always creeped me out. That's the only other type that I can think of that was specifically different. Because there are variations on grays, variations on the kind of reptilian looking ones, variations on these Nordic looking ones. Just like us, there's different kinds. But that was the weirdest one for sure.
Yes, it is.
So there's different armies of these things. It seems like they're working together, the praying mantis type and the grays. Yeah,
they absolutely are. I don't think, I think what common misconception is that there may be rivalries and fighting within their ranks. There may be a few rebel sets of them here or there somewhere that we're not, we don't really know. But the point is, you've got God in heaven with the angelic beings, the sons of God, the B'nai Ha-Elohim, and then you've got Satan in the third that fell with him. And so you're either on one or the other. There's no real in between there, like I said before. So they're all working for the same master, ultimately.
Right.
And towards the same end, right? I mean, the ultimate end is to deceive us in any way possible and to keep us from the truth and to keep us from eternal life.
Right.
To keep us from salvation, period. That's their end game. Every soul they can get is a win in their book. And ultimately, that's the end game.
Do these praying mantis things, do they have just, 2 arms and 2 legs, or do they have multiple?
It only had, the ones that I saw, only had 2 arms and 2 legs.
Okay, because I think about a praying mantis, I'm thinking about like a big old bug.
Yeah. No, there were no like 8-legged things that I saw.
Praying mantis.
God, I don't think I would have survived seeing something like that.
Praying mantis.
But no, the arms and legs were just super long. And so they looked like they were crouching when they were sitting, or when they were because they always looked like they were crouching, and they were always kind of back and away from everyone, like they were watching everything. Like I always thought they were the ones in control. Like they were probably the top of the food chain in there, because I never saw them do any work, but they were always watching everybody.
Gotcha.
So they seemed like they were the big guys, like that's the 4-star general in the corner and everyone else is just following orders. So I think he was probably, that's what I thought. But of course, they never sat down and showed me their org chart, so I don't know.
Right. When you were in these facilities or these craft, did you ever see one from the outside?
I don't have any good memories of the outsides of these crafts.
Okay.
It's just wild. No, always inside.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, I was wondering about that.
Yeah.
That's a creepy experience. The praying mantis thing, the older looking grays, the Nordics. Now, you touched on the sons of God, and I know some people out there, they want to call these our brothers. In the sense, they are, but like what Gary Wayne says, we had Gary Wayne on, and we discussed that, and he says,
love him.
The sons of God have nothing to do with Israel, have nothing to do with us. They are the original sons of God, and we are the prophetic sons and daughters of God. We're a different creation. So when you're talking about these abductions and people being basically raped and fetuses taken and cattle mutilations, blood's almost like cattle blood's almost like humans, and taking the wombs.
Right.
Now, if these things are truly our brothers, why would they need all this extra tissue to create a hybrid when they can just you go back, it's so simple. You go back to the sons of God mating with human women, they have abominations. It's not the same blood line. They're not in my opinion, they're not our brothers. We'll be adopted into the family as the sons and daughters of God, but they are a different creation.
They are, but they're still a creation.
Exactly.
And when they're in a corporeal form, that means they must have blood and tissue and DNA, even though we don't understand it. And they operate on different levels of physics and they can manipulate time, space, energy, and matter in ways we don't understand because they're so far advanced.
Right.
But I do think that something happened after the flood of Noah where it became more difficult for them to be able to procreate with humans. And I think they've been trying to work out the kinks of that ever since. Once they weren't able to stop Jesus from being born, like I said, that changed their game plan. Now it's try to make them look human enough to fit in, try to do anything we can to mess with these people, try to spread enough lies to keep people from, having salvation, from finding God. So, it changed their narrative, their game plan a little bit once Jesus was here, and then they accidentally crucified him, not realizing that was their downfall, right?
Right.
So, but yeah, they are a sons of God, and we are sons of God, but we're not the same.
No.
They're definitely different. And yeah, we were created by God after them, but they were there when God said, let's make man in our image,
right.
So obviously there's going to be some similarities. And the Bible talks about angels all the time, walking through walls, breaking people out of prison, eating and drinking with people, so clearly they have the ability to come in and out of a corporeal form.
Wouldn't that be cool to do right now?
Yeah, I think we'll get there someday, but not yet, right? Once God takes us up, I think it's going to be a whole, then we're going to get to experience something very different. I'm looking forward to that.
Absolutely. Now, there's some people out there that, with both men and women that have been abducted, and these beings show them their children. What do you think about that?
I've seen my children too.
Wow.
I held one as an infant. They asked me to hold it. This is when I saw the rows of the tanks that had the fetuses in them. It didn't feel like a normal baby. It didn't cuddle into me. It didn't respond to me like one of my babies would. I wanted to keep it, just because I thought, well, if I didn't understand yet. I thought, well, it's part me, there's got to be something I can do, but they wouldn't let me keep it. They sent me home. Then much later, and God allowed me to see these 3 children, it was just a couple of years ago. I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago. I can't remember. I have it written down somewhere when it happened. I woke up and I thought my kids were standing by my bed, and I called one of their names. And as I'm focusing, I realized, oh, wait, that's not, that child. I'm not going to say the kid's name out, but they looked enough like my kids. I could see similarities, but they were shorter and they were really strong and stocky looking and just, robust kind of, but they were much shorter than my kids. They almost had a blue-green tint to their skin. Their eyes were very black. And the funny thing is the room around where they were was black, more black than the rest of the room. I couldn't get my husband to wake up. They were wanting me to come with them, and all I felt from them was evil. They were not loving. They didn't emit any sense of, I love you, Mom, or like they were happy to see me or anything like that. They just wanted me to come with them. But the evil was palpable in the room.
Wow.
And when I refused, the evil went up a few notches. And when that happened, I just felt just terror overcome me, and I called on Jesus, and boom, just like that, they were gone. And my husband suddenly came out of whatever coma sleep they had put him into, and responded to me. I'm like, why didn't you help me? And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about, because he was just, they have the ability to just knock you out so that, nobody else can help you. I mean, but I could tell, and I think God allowed that to happen because I had already, was born again. I was saved at that point, and I knew that Jesus was the authority at that point, which is why I called on him when it really started to get dicey. But because I kept thinking, God, if they used my eggs to make these kids, because so many pregnancies would disappear in the 3rd month for me, then maybe they can be redeemed. Maybe they're good. Maybe I could help them, that there was half good, kind of a Rosemary's Baby scenario.
Right.
That was definitely not the case. I think God let me see them so that I would see that. I mean, I'm not saying I get to make the choice whether they're redeemable or not. Please don't get me wrong.
No.
It's just that I could tell from seeing them and being with them that there just was nothing there. They were soulless. There was no love. There was no compassion. There was just nothing. There was evil. There was that, but there just was nothing. There was nothing there for me. And so I felt like I finally got some closure that I really needed after seeing them. So for people who see them or say that they see their children, I've heard different kinds of stories and different reactions from different kinds of kids. And like I said, I think there's been this progression of, as they're going through and experimenting with creating these hybrid entities, because they're not human, how they're reacting, interacting, and I think some of them are just a lot more evil than others. I don't know.
That's interesting, because I wonder, when you said that, wonder if they they were born, or they were developed into to what they were when you saw them, and I wonder if they had a Nephilim spirit indwelt in them.
Yeah.
Well, by definition, they would be a Nephilim. They would be a modern day Nephilim, because Nephilim is just the progeny of a human and a fallen angelic entity, or a fallen son of God, right? So by definition, they would be a Nephilim. And then if that Nephilim dies, the spirit is a demon. So my guess is they are already demonic, because when they die, that spirit is a demon, right? So by nature, they're not going to be very nice. But I don't know, and I can't judge anyone else's interactions that they may have had with any of their hybrid children. All I can say is, we know from the Bible that is an abomination in God's eyes. That is not God's creation and not how God intended it.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
It seems like they came through a portal or something.
Yeah, I don't know how they
void,
arrived.
Like a roving event horizon or something.
Yeah. They do manipulate. Like I said, they know they work on a level we don't understand. They work with future physics. That's another phrase coined by Dr. David Jacobs. And they, as L.A. Marzulli likes to say, they do manipulate space, matter, energy, and time. And we can't fit these entities into our little world view because they're operating in a worldview that is so much greater than ours. Because, they've come from heavenly realms that we don't understand. I mean, I just think about my near life experience, and I don't understand how that happened, but it was incredible. And I was very much still aware, and I was still me. I just wasn't in this physical body, but then boom, I was right back in it. So, do they have the ability to jump in and out of bodies? If we don't know, we don't have any information to go on.
There was a, I don't know what year it was, but there was a government group you might be familiar with called the Collins Elite.
Yes. And
they concluded that these beings are demonic, meaning they're demonically indwelt, and I'm sure you heard the word saber, right?
Yes.
The acronym for basically biological extraterrestrial.
That's the newer one. Yes.
Yeah,
that
saber.
came out recently, right? Yeah.
And that struck me when I heard the Collins Elite thing. I think it was Justin Fall who did that on one of his documentaries, and it made a lot of sense. That these entities are obviously they're fallen sons of God, and I don't know. I mean, maybe these older looking wrinkly grays and these insectoids and whatever else is out there, maybe they were once beautiful and they're just degraded to what they are now. Kind of like
right.
I don't know, like you see in the Bible, the satyrs, maybe the satyrs, these devil goat gods were once beautiful. Maybe they were just degraded down to what they are now.
And who's to say what's beautiful too? I mean,
sure, that's a good point.
You know what? I mean, they could look at us and be like, man, those are ugly.
Hideous.
I mean,
hideous humans.
So based on how we look, yeah, but I do agree, because the Bible says we were made in God's in their image. That you're probably right, though. I do agree with you. I think it's probably a different or degraded, like when they fell, maybe that some of that beauty was stripped away from them.
I think so, because you make a good point, that they made us in their image, but these things don't look like us,
No,
they just don't.
No, they're definitely nothing like what we have here, but they do look like some of the creatures that we have here, and some of them do look pretty similar. I mean, some of the features, the Greys and the Nordics and the Reptilians, they're still similar. So, and I will say that the Grey that I was with, he was beautiful, He's not as beautiful now, but he really was beautiful. So I think it's what we're used to seeing as well, when what we find beautiful, again, is subjective, right? So it's hard to say. And I can't wait until I get all those answers from God someday. I mean, I feel about a lot of things, if it doesn't change my salvation, then I don't worry about it too much.
Yeah.
But I can't wait for all those answers for sure.
One of the last questions I have before we close out is someone out there who's listening to this or read your book and they've experienced this type of things, these events. What advice would you give to them?
Yeah, my advice would be to get prayed up, put on the full armor of God, and be confident and comfortable in knowing that Jesus is the authority over them. And if you're not, then reach out to someone who is a strong Christian or is, does have a better understanding of that. But is Ephesians 11 or 12? I always get the verse wrong, where it talks about putting on the full armor of God. I highly recommend that. And just really knowing that authority is there, that Jesus is there for you. Call out to Jesus. He's going to hear you. He listens when you call out to him. He hears you. They can't take you against your will as long as you have God. So I highly recommend that, just pray. Praying is my number one thing I have. And then, follow people like you guys, because you have so many good people on your show, people like Vicky Joy Anderson in LA, and reach out to people through websites. You can reach out to me through my website. If you send me a message, it might take me a while, but I do promise to try to get back to everyone who sends me a message or has a question or just wants to share a story. Please do. I'm happy to get back to people that way as well.
Awesome. Give your website out and where to find your book, Stolen Seed, Evil Harvest.
Right. Right now, Stolen Seed, Evil Harvest is available exclusively at lamarzulli.net. That's LAMARZULLI.net. And I'll give you all this information as well if you want for your show notes. My website is my name, KarenWilkinsonAuthor.com. It's KarinWilkinson. If you're not sure, just put an I where you would put whatever other letter. Author.com. You can find me on Facebook just under my name, Karen Wilkinson. You'll know it's me because you'll see my book in the background. And you can find me on Instagram, most social media. You can, like I said, get to the book through my website, or you can order it directly through L.A. Marzulli's website.
Thank you very much for all that information. Yeah, that was.
Yeah, sorry, that was a lot.
No, I don't mean it like that. I was just that part. The whole podcast was just big surprises one after another. I pretty much heard like 10 different podcasts in one with you, with all the, I'm serious, like all the different things that the other people seen. You pretty much seen it all in one, all wrapped up in one big.
It's been a long life. I'm not young,
absolutely.
so. But I'm just grateful that part is done. And now, God's allowing me to use this for good. So if it helps somebody to know how to stop it, if it helps somebody to realize these are not our benevolent space brothers, then that's everything. That's what I want to do.
Yes, ma'am. Amen to that. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And if you can, just hang out a little bit. We're just going to close out the show. We can talk in a second.
All right. Thank you so much, Lionel and Dominic.
Thank you so much.
I had a great time.
You too.
Tonight.
It was awesome. It really was.
Everybody else too. Thank you for listening and have a blessed night. Thank you, everybody.